So Hare Krishna, this is our second class on the Bhagavad Gita. Last week we were able to cover the whole first chapter, but this time we're going to cover a great deal less. We're going to start with chapter 2, text 1 through 15. It'll talk about the final portion of Arjuna's distress and his final discussions with Krishna, his surrender to Krishna. And then Krishna is going to give us a little kind of a thumbnail sketch or a little beginning summary of what he's going to be talking about. And just in those first few verses, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, he really covers a lot of ground. And so I'd like to discuss those a little bit more slowly. And then next week we'll get into some of his more detailed instructions. So we're starting out here. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, we left off here, and for those who can see the screen, that a picture of Arjuna, his eyes in tears and in distress. He was confronted with killing his family, and it was just all too much to him. We discussed quite a bit last week about the nature of his good heart and how it was affecting him to have to participate in the battle. And so we left him in that condition. He'd sat down in the chariot in complete distress. And so in the beginning of chapter 2, Krishna begins to address his problem. He first tries to just give him a little bit of encouragement and to point out that he's not heading in the right direction. He's not seeing things clearly. But that doesn't seem to be sufficient for him. And then he has to enter into some more deeper discussion. That gives us the chance to hear Bhagavad Gita in its entirety. So he's there, he's on the chariot, he's in distress, and Krishna responds in verse number 2. He says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. It's the first time Krishna speaks. Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupastitam anarya jushtam asvargyam akirti karamajuna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. So this is his response to Arjuna's distress and his arguments that we heard in chapter 1. And Arjuna is saying, the slide I have here is on the one side Arjuna says, and the other side Krishna responds. And Arjuna says, and he mentioned in the last chapter that neither temptation nor provocation are sufficient for him to desire the battle. And Prabhupada mentioned how that demonstrates his very saintly character. Generally, we act out of motivation. And if there's something very desirable, or if there's provocation, we may fight with others for it. Prabhupada was talking when we had Nectar of Instruction how our strong desires cause us to fight with one another in competition. So generally, if we have something that's very, very valuable, that we desire strongly, we might be willing to compete with, or even fight with, or even kill others. And of course, on the other hand, if people are causing us all kinds of trouble, provoking us in various ways, that also can cause us to become angry. But Arjuna had such a saintly character that neither of those things were affecting him. He said, even if I had rulership over all the three worlds, it wouldn't be an enticement for me to kill my family. And even though the Duryodhana and his cohorts had done so many really, really egregious things to them, he was ready to forgive them rather than to kill them. And then after that, he tries to, and he just kind of expresses his heart there, that he's, it says he's overwhelmed with compassion. He just feels like that. And then he tries to kind of put a rational face on it. And he's saying that for him to engage in the battle is objectively wrong. He says it will be sinful to kill the family. And also, because he says not only will he be responsible for harming the present generation, but past and future ones as well. He says that when all the elders are dead and also they're misbehaving, that the younger generations will stray from the path of religion. They won't perform the proper, pinda or shraddha ceremonies for the departed, and they will fall down from their positions. And the future generations will not have proper guidance or behavior. They will also be led into ruination. So he says that not only is it subjectively wrong, because of his feelings of compassion, but it's objectively wrong. And we discussed a lot last time how this was rationalization on his part. He knew very well. And he'll show some signs of it here. And so Krishna responds in this verse, and he says that Arjuna is showing signs of contamination. The word is kashmalam, or dirtiness or contamination. Other people translate it as weakness. And actually, it says that the word Arjuna means pure or spotless. So when Krishna calls him Arjuna in this verse, he's indicating that this is uncharacteristic and appropriate for him. And then he says Arjuna is acting like someone who doesn't understand the true value of human life. He's anarya jishtam. And anarya is the persons who, Prabhupada translates, is persons who do not know the value of life, and jishtam, practiced by. So he says you're acting like someone an uncivilized person, an unspiritually civilized person. And then he says that his actions will cause Arjuna to be disgraced in this life, a kirti, infamy, and to not reach the heavenly planets in his next life, asvargyam, which does not lead to higher planets. Asvargya is the heavenly planets. And so Arjuna was arguing that it would be sinful, and he would take on sinful reactions for taking part in the battle. Here, Krishna is saying that and of course he's thinking that he's performing pious activities by avoiding the battle. He's following the proper procedures. And Krishna says, no, that's not going to lead you to Svarga, where pious activities do. This is not pious, what you're doing. And also it says it'll cause you to be infamous, disgraced, because you're not following actually what you're supposed to do. And Arjuna understands this. He came to the battle knowing what his duty was. That's why he was there in the first place. But he was overpowered by this. This extreme compassion that covered his understanding. And so here Krishna, he very, very clearly says, "No, what you're saying here is dirtiness, a contamination. You're acting like someone who doesn't know the real value of life, and it's going to lead you to infamy, and you will not go to higher planets. This is not pious activities." And then there's a quote here from the purport where Prabhupada talks about this quite a bit. It's Bhagavad Gita 2.2 in the purport, where Prabhupada explains this Aryan. He says, the word Aryan is applicable to persons who know the value of life and have a civilization based on spiritual realization. Persons who are led by the material conception of life do not know that the aim of life is realization of the absolute truth, Vishnu or Bhagavan, and they are captivated by the external features of the material world. And therefore we do not know what liberation is. I have this in bold here, this next sentence. Persons who have no knowledge of liberation from material bondage are called non-Aryans. And although Arjuna was a Kshatriya, he was deviating from his prescribed duties by declining to fight. This act of cowardice is described as befitting the non-Aryans. Such deviation from duty does not help one in the progress of spiritual life, nor does it even give one the opportunity to become famous in this world. Prabhupada says, Lord Krishna did not approve of the so-called compassion of Arjuna for his kinsmen. And so we of course, I want to point out that Prabhupada mentioned many times how his compassion was a sign of his soft-heartedness and of his devotion. The problem is that it's out of proportion. See, it's too strong. It's clouding his vision, and he's not doing his proper duty. So therefore, it's in that sense, it's so-called compassion, as Prabhupada says here. And really, Arjuna should be, and ordinarily is quite convinced by the power of dharma. You know, he said in the first chapter that he sees only causes of misfortune. Right? But dharma, everybody knows, is established by Krishna or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not an ordinary set of rules and regulations. Like here, when we make legislation in this world, right, sometimes we have to adjust the legislation. It has unintended consequences. We don't foresee this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And so then they amend it or repeal it or make change, do all things like that to it. But with Krishna, it's he's someone who's omniscient. So when he creates a system, it always works. So you can be guaranteed, if you're a follower of Dharma, that you're doing the right thing, and that it will do a couple things. It will minimize your sin, and maximize your pious activities, and it will also produce the best result for others. Arjuna was seeing how the whole family was going to fall into ruination, and what would happen. But look like so I looked at I have some quote from the Bhagavatam here, describing what happened after the battle, and Maharaj Yudhisthira took the throne. Remember, this battle was about the succession to the throne. Did we want to have Duryodhana? And we can only imagine what life would have been like under him, who was already deviating from religious principles by usurping the throne. What would he have done if he had been successful? Would he have suddenly become a very pious king? No, not likely. And in any case, Maharaj Yudhisthira was clearly the most qualified person. And so by having the battle take place in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, 10th chapter, there's texts 4, 5, and 6. It describes in a nutshell what it was like when Maharaj Yudhisthira was ruling. And that was because of his saintliness. Prabhupada calls them Rajarishis, saintly kings. And so it says here, during the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira, the clouds showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cow used to moisten the grazing ground with milk. The rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season paid their tax quota to the king in profusion. Because of the kings having no enemy, the living beings were not at any time disturbed by mental agonies, diseases, or excessive heat or cold. So by doing what Arjuna foresaw was a devastating thing, actually everyone benefited tremendously. And so that's generally how people have, and Arjuna ordinarily would have, confidence in Dharma. They would do their duty, understanding that it's only going to have good effect. It can't be, I see only causes of misfortune. Not if you're doing Dharma. Then your vision is wrong, and not the action is wrong. So here I say Arjuna is not following his dharma as a warrior is a sign that his compassion is out of proportion. We mentioned that, and as we will see, the root of his disproportionate compassion lies in his failure to understand the most fundamental of spiritual principles. So we'll see why when Krishna begins his teachings, what he focuses on first. Because he's trying to deal with that particular thing. Arjuna, his compassionate nature is noble, it's saintly, it's a sign of devotion, but it's out of proportion because he's missing something very crucial. That compassion has allowed him to forget something he already knows. And it's something very, very basic to all of spiritual life. And so we're gonna see how Krishna begins because of that. He's going to touch right on the perfect point where Arjuna is weak right now. Arjuna's response to Krishna's urging him to go ahead and fight, and his judgment that he's doing the wrong thing, is that we in one way Arjuna kind of doesn't try to argue his point, all of his points like he did before. So you can see that he sees his arguments are kind of weak, but he focuses on the part that really hurts him the most, and that's his strongest argument is Bhishma and Drona. Those we heard even in the first chapter how Lord Krishna drove the chariot in front of Bhishma, Pramukataha, in the front of the face of Bhishma and Drona, he could see them. Because these two persons were, you could find some fault with them. They're on the wrong side. They boasted that they were beholding to Duryodhana because he maintained them. And but they didn't believe that Duryodhana had any chance of success. They knew that Lord Krishna's presence on the side of the Pandavas meant that the Pandavas would be successful. They had not participated in any of the intrigues to kill the Pandavas and to usurp the throne. They didn't support that at all. And they had been of such great value to Arjuna. Dronacharya had taught him everything he knows about the military arts. His grandfather Bhishma Dev had been one of the few people who were friendly to the Pandavas as young men, without their father, and so he owed them a tremendous debt of gratitude. And so he responds in verse 4 to Krishna. He says Arjuna uvacha Katam Bhishmam Mahang Sankye Dronam Cha Madhusudana Yashubi Pratayotsyami Pujaha Varisudana. So Arjuna said, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counteract with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? So there's a play here that he's going to use arrows when he says they actually should be worshipped. He's saying that they're like his gurus, since they're his teachers, his superiors and teachers, that he should be, instead of shooting arrows at them, he should be worshiping them with flowers. That's what he thinks. And so this is, it's particularly painful for him to be fighting against them. He doesn't feel that, he feels that they, maybe they have a little bit of culpability for this because they're fighting on the wrong side, but that's excusable. That's just a small fault compared to what all they've done for him. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport, he says, he goes further and shows this is from the verse 6, where Arjuna says that he would rather become a beggar. And Prabhupada says, Arjuna did not know whether he should fight and risk unnecessary violence, although fighting is the duty of the Kshatriyas, or whether he should refrain and live by begging. If he did not conquer the enemy, begging would be his only means of subsistence, nor was there certainty of victory because either side might emerge victorious. Even if victory awaited them and their cause was justified, still if the sons of Dhritarashtra died in battle, it would be very difficult to live in their absence. Under the circumstances, that would be another kind of defeat for them. All these considerations by Arjuna definitely proved that not only was he a great devotee of the Lord, but he was also highly enlightened and had complete control over his mind and senses. His desire to live by begging, although he was born in the royal household, is another sign of detachment. He was truly virtuous, as these qualities combined with his faith in the words of instruction of Sri Krishna, his spiritual master, indicate. That, of course, is going to come a little bit down the line. It is concluded that Arjuna was quite fit for liberation. Unless the senses are controlled, there is no chance of elevation to the platform of knowledge, and without knowledge and devotion, there is no chance of liberation. Arjuna was competent in all these attributes over and above his enormous attributes in his material relationships. We talked about his detachment before. That even for the rule of the three worlds, he didn't want to participate. And here it says he's willing to become a beggar, which Burijan Prabhu in his Surrender Unto Me, he notes that this is really abhorrent for Kshatriyas. They're not allowed to beg for anything. And he gives the story of Bhima, who I think they were in exile, and Draupadi saw this beautiful lotus flower floating down the river, and she said, bring me some more of those. And he went cruising up the mountain, and it was controlled by some celestial beings. I can't remember if it's Yakshas or I think Yakshas that controlled that, and it was owned by Kuvera in that case. And they said, you ask permission and you can take them. But he said that he's a Kshatriya, he doesn't ask for anything. And so he fought with them. So he said that the notion of begging, of asking for something, asking for favors, of begging is naturally abhorrent to the Kshatriyas. And so when we see this in Arjuna, it's a very significant thing he's saying, for him that he's willing even to go that far. And the Prabhupada, I want us to remember that last verse, because when we come to the teachings, this is going to be really important, especially text 15. Prabhupada says, unless the senses are controlled, there is no chance of elevation to the platform of knowledge, and without knowledge and devotion, there is no chance of liberation. Let's just put that in there partially for the added character analysis of Arjuna, but also for that. That's a little foreshadowing there. So after that, Arjuna surrenders to Krishna. He says he's completely confused. He doesn't know what to do. I guess Krishna's arguments have influenced him to some degree. He doesn't have confidence in what he's saying. At the same time, he says, I just can't. He says, his grief is drying up my senses. I don't know what to do. You have to help me out of this. He's, at this point, he rather understands he should do it, but he just doesn't know how. It's physically impossible for him. Again, that compassion is paralyzing him. And so that's when, and so actually here it says, the verse where it mentions his surrender. Karpanya doshopahata svabhava prachami tvam dharma sumuda cheta yachcheyasya nishchitam bruhitan me shishyasteham sharimam tvam prapanam. Now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple, Shishyasteham, and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So this is the key moment where the Bhagavad Gita begins in earnest, and Krishna is going to give his detailed instructions. Arjuna has opened the way for this, and now we're going to hear the philosophy. And so Krishna begins his instructions, and I'm going to read the translations of texts 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. These are the ones we're going to focus on today. Because in my view, they give us a quick summary, kind of a thumbnail sketch of what Krishna is going to teach. The second chapter in itself is considered to be kind of a summary chapter of the teachings. The other ones bring everything out in much more detail. This is kind of a summary of the summary when we take a look, and he touches right on the part that touches right on Arjuna's weakness that's really causing him to be paralyzed as he is. So let's look at it. In 2:11, it says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. So here he's indicating that there's a very primary root misconception there, or lack of a conception. And in 12, it says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And then 2:13, as the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. We have our famous changing body displays. We've seen this very clearly. I didn't even bother to put it here in our PowerPoint because it should be all familiar to you. And then text 2:14 and 2:15. These are actually a couple of my favorite verses in Bhagavad Gita because of certain interesting reasons. In 14 it says, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance of and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. And 15, O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. Okay? So that's the little nutshell. Krishna says a whole lot in just a few little verses there. We'll look at it a little bit. I'm saying it gives a little brief introductory summary. Text 11 reveals that Arjuna's paralyzing compassion is caused by a lack of wisdom, and that he's going to address that lack of wisdom in 12 through 15. And the sea touches right on that part. Text 12 reveals that everyone is eternal, which indicates that one has already experienced death many, many times and will continue to do so in the future. Right? This is what's bothering Arjuna so much, is he's all the death of all the people dear to him, right? And he feels like it's like it's the end of the world. Right? So he feels it. And then 13 reveals that we experience something similar to death even while living. What he's saying, we'll discuss that. All right? That what's happening is that even while we're alive, right, our bodies are changing. He already says it in text 12 that we always live, right? There's never a time when we don't exist, and there never will be a time. Right? So what happens? Right? We know that our bodies and ourselves in this life have started at a certain point, and we know it's going to end. Right? So that what happened before that, and what happened after that, says, well, what happened is just like now, our body is changing from youth, to childhood, to youth, and to old age. Then a similar transformation takes place at the end of this body's life. You go into another body. So this is, in some ways, we're experiencing death right now. We can't be a little child anymore. When we're old, we can't be young anymore. We feel that.
But there is no point of pain while changing the body. Death generally we mostly fear because of the pain it creates.
Well, that will be Prue was saying that the problem with the actual death that's worse than the death we have in that transformation of our bodies is that we feel the pain and that sort of stuff. Well, that we're going to get a little bit to in the next text. But it's also, I mean, for Arjuna, he's just thinking he's going to be separated from them. They're going to be, it's going to be terrible for them. That sort of thing. But it's what Krishna is saying is that death is a normal part of life in so many ways. And so that Arjuna shouldn't be so overly concerned with just the fact that these people will die. He's out of proportion. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have compassion for them, shouldn't have compassion for them, shouldn't feel sorry to have to do it, but he needs to do it. So the text 14, we're going to discuss these a little bit more carefully. I'm just showing the quick summary here. Text 14 reveals the importance of tolerance in the face of transient pleasant and unpleasant sensations. Arjuna is faced by this very unpleasant situation, and so that's really the root of his problem. He just freaks out. He just doesn't want to do it. And text 15 reveals that it's possible to be free from death altogether. So these are tiny little brief comments on Krishna's introductory summary. So let's look at it a little bit more carefully. And we see from text 15 that Krishna lets Arjuna know right from the beginning that nothing short of liberation is a worthy objective. Okay? Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana's desire for the throne and Arjuna's desire for his family to remain intact are totally unimportant in comparison. That since we are eternal, and because death is ongoing, both in a subtle way, even during this life, and in a more thoroughgoing way at the end of our lives. What is the use of any objective that just is temporary and dealing only with a particular lifetime or a couple of lifetimes? They're small compared to actually experiencing what the word is deathlessness. The word that Prabhupada translates as liberation, right, is deathlessness.
So for my own liberation, I can kill anyone?
Well, that we're going to talk about later, okay, about what that means. But at this point, we're dealing. It's not that death is meaningless. You see, the problem here we have to keep our context in mind. the context here is that Arjuna is not doing his dharmic duty because of his aversion to killing. Yeah. So it's not that we're going to go completely to the other side. This people can do that. They can, because we're going to discuss a lot more about the soul in detail. Here, the soul isn't even mentioned directly. It just says the embodied. The embodied is passing through these different bodies. Right? And so then next time we're going to get into who that embodied is, it's the soul, it's us, and all the different characteristics. So here it's just kind of mentioned casually as that which inhabits the body. Mm-hmm. And so then we'll talk because later on there'll be another verse that relates to this point, where it says that the soul neither kills or is killed. And so that can address directly your question here. Does it mean that death is meaningless? We can kill anybody and it doesn't matter? I think that'll be a perfect time to address that in some more detail. Right, yes. But in this case, the context is such that Arjuna, because of his aversion to killing his friends and his relatives, is not doing his duty.
So he is telling Krishna, death is normal, it happens, and because even if it causes pain, you have to tolerate.
And that's what's going to happen. So we're going to go over that a little step by step here. Yeah. So and then Krishna's telling him that really the real goal, the real thing everybody should be aiming at, is this deathlessness. Okay. Amrita. See, mrityu is death, and without death, that liberation means deathlessness. There's a way that death doesn't even occur anymore. Yeah.
That is 15th text.
That's 15. That's text 15. Okay. So right away, Krishna is, and he's going to keep repeating that as we in the next section of chapter 2. How this is what Arjuna should be focused on. He shouldn't be. And Arjuna, Prabhupada already says he's a fit person for liberation because he doesn't have so many other super attachments. He doesn't want to have so many things, and he just is freaked out by his compassion. Doesn't want to kill them, but he says, even for the 3 worlds, I wouldn't do it. He doesn't have so many desires and attachments. He's actually quite detached already. Prabhupada says. So liberation is the notion of liberation or transcendence is perfectly suitable for him actually, except for his little problem he's having at the moment. Okay, so let's look a little bit at how these instructions should impact Arjuna and to try to bring him back into line. So if we understand that everything is eternal, right, Arjuna's perspective should really begin to change, both about their deaths and about his suffering regarding them. Because what we're doing is we're really opening up a much broader perspective on things. Arjuna is thinking that this is going to be so devastating, it's going to ruin his life, it's going to be terrible. And then when you think of yourself as eternal, then immediately you begin to think about who knows how many times you've gone through similar things as this. This is a tiny episode. And I'm gonna quote a great sage from a classic American movie and a novel here that summarizes that. This is it's in the book. It was made into the movie Gone with the Wind. So it was written by Margaret Mitchell and spoken by the character Scarlett O'Hara. and there was a situation where in the past there was these days movies generally have happy endings. But in the past, people used to like unhappy ones more because it was more emotional. And so you used to really have unhappy endings. And so this movie was it came to a kind of a climactic, it looked like a classic unhappy ending, where one of the main characters here, everything that seemed at first, it seemed like everything was going to come together and we have this beautiful happy ending. And then, as often happens then with these older movies that have the unhappy endings, suddenly it changes. Just you snatch your defeat from the jaws of victory, and so it looks like everything is lost, and in tears, the character Scarlett O'Hara says, she stops, tries to sober herself up a little bit, and says she's not going to think about this today. She'll try to find a solution because, after all, tomorrow is another day. so, well, it's that perspective that that life goes on. There's still something that's going to happen. When Arjuna can understand that he's eternal, then it says, as seen against the background of eternity, any event, however important, looks smaller and less significant than when you think that this is my whole life and everything is going down. You're really focused on the present so much. When you have a little bit more perspective, she was able to come out of it. She said, okay, tomorrow's another day. Maybe we can work this out.
So tomorrow maybe we can work.
Yeah. See, tomorrow's another day. She says, after all, tomorrow's another day. Right? That life is going to continue. It doesn't end right here. It continues.
Right.
And so it's going to continue both for Arjuna's relatives, and it's going to continue for him. It's not the end of the world. So a little bit of perspective helps you to not be as overwhelmed. It still may be a very traumatic event, but it doesn't have to be so overpowering. Right? So immediately Krishna gives him that perspective and introduces indirectly the notion of a soul. Because how is it that we are, because we all know we die. How is it that we never exist? Oh, I've always existed and always will exist. That question naturally comes up. However, it says what the broader perspective doesn't do, it may help him, be a little bit less overwhelmed. May give him a little bit of, a little emotional distance to at least to behave properly, but it doesn't take away the pain or pleasure that one feels at that moment. So it's still, that and that's really the thing that's killing him the most. He had knowledge already.
Right.
He really did. He knew all about the soul. Everybody in the Vedic culture knows about that. He knew about Dharma. But just when it came right down to it, when he had picked up his bow already. He was ready to shoot, and when it came time to start killing, it just was too crazy. So this is why Krishna tells him that, it's going to be painful, but you have to learn how to tolerate these things in the performance of your duty. You have to learn how to tolerate this kind of discomfort. Don't let it overpower you. It's natural, but don't let it overpower you. So he says that. So he tries to first give him a little bit of perspective. So he has a little bit of relief. But he says, now of course it's still going to be very painful for you. You have to learn how to tolerate that. So and hopefully he's trying to sober Arjuna up a little bit. I say here that Arjuna didn't actually lack knowledge to begin with. The root problem was that his senses recoiled at the prospect of killing those dear to him, and his understanding was overpowered. So Krishna is trying to reestablish a little bit of understanding first to calm him down, and then he said, look, and you understand how difficult it is. And we this is something that we experience all the time. I've tried to come up with some simple example here. I have a picture of a really evil-looking syringe for those who can't see it here. This is with a really long needle. It looks like it'd be really bad. It's like a really super old-fashioned one too, so probably the needle is pretty dull. And so imagine sometimes we have to do something. We go to the doctor, go to the dentist. It's something we have to do, and we do it voluntarily, right? We call up, we make our appointments. We know what we're supposed to do, and it's beneficial for us, And we also know that even if it's kind of unpleasant, it'll be over with. You'll go in there and you'll be done, and even later on in the day, you won't think about the massive shot you just got or whatever, the drilling of your teeth, whatever it may be. You'll be over it pretty fast. Even that you have some perspective on the situation. You know what's the appropriate thing to do. You need to do this. But sometimes you get the desire to say, let's cancel that appointment and postpone it. Just because of the immediate, you don't want to go through that experience, even though it's kind of a short-lived one. The senses recoil, right? So that's why this verse is really an important one, because that's what happens. Prabhupada says here, I'm going to quote from the purport. this is from 414 in the purport. It says, in the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. One has to execute his duty in spite of climactic inconveniences. Similarly to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya or illusion. And so we kind of discussed this situation a little bit in a little bit different way in the Nectar of Instruction. And this is why this verse is so important. It says, we may be sincere in our desire to serve Krishna and convinced that it is the best and most worthwhile path. But as we heard in the Nectar of Instruction, steadiness in our practice depends upon the ability to control the senses. So just like we may be convinced of Krishna consciousness, just like we're convinced that we need to go to the doctor and have our little treatment, we may know it, we may even have some perspective and know that it's a temporary discomfort that we may have to do, or a temporary sacrifice that we have to make. But sometimes we just encounter resistance from the senses that way. This is matra sparshas tu konteya. It's when the senses are in contact with the objects. It means the sense perceptions are sensations, right? And so, we may want to do something. We may think it's right. We may be motivated to do it. But if it's unpleasant, there's a natural visceral reaction that says no. Or if there's a chance to have some pleasant sensation, there's a natural pulling towards it. Right, so we had with Duryodhana, they were pulling towards the notion of having a kingdom. Arjuna's recoiling from having to kill. Right? And so what Krishna's talking about here is the same thing we're talking about, controlling the senses. Right? They naturally seek what is pleasant and avoid what is not. And they carry away our understanding, even if it's only momentarily. So this is something we fight. We make a commitment to serving Krishna. We mean it. We believe it's the right thing. We have a true desire to do it. But our service is not always steady. And it's oftentimes because of this particular effect. We have to either do something that isn't so pleasant, doesn't produce such pleasant sensations, or we're foregoing something that does in order to do it. And so there's a push and a pull. And so this is something that's intrinsic to our spiritual lives. We have to do what Arjuna does. We have to learn how to become more tolerant and to not be controlled by wanting the pleasant sensations and wanting to avoid the unpleasant ones. We'll talk about that more towards the end.
What can be the pull, bro? An unpleasant sensation that would cause not to do devotional service?
But what if you have a chance to go, to have some type of enjoyment, right? Like we want to have some happiness, right? So pleasant sensations also maybe draw us away. There's an opportunity to go do something that maybe isn't a devotional activity,
right? Generally,
right? But it's pleasant,
Yeah, generally pleasant sensations only we tend to move away from devotional service.
Yeah.
But
so there's attraction towards those things. That means that we may take a break from our service, right? Do something else, and then the aversion means we want to do the service, but it's pushing us away. We have a hard time to do it.
Actually, you are not able to enjoy what you are doing in devotional service.
Well, it just means we don't want to. Nobody wants unpleasant sensations naturally. So like Arjuna, we may become resistant. We may be paralyzed by it. We may try to find reasons why we shouldn't do it, like he is. He's trying to rationalize it. All right. So the senses give us are attracted to things other than the service if they're pleasant, and we have trouble to execute our service if they're unpleasant to the sensations are not pleasing. Attachment and aversion is what it is. We mentioned that's going to
Ragadvesha.
be a raga dvesha. And so let's take a look here at that in order to discuss this tolerance. Let's look a little bit at 2:15, because first it says in 14 that we have to learn how to tolerate, and then it mentions here in 2:15 a higher degree of accomplishment. Ayang hina vyatayantyete purusham purushashaba samaduka sukham dhiram somritatvaya kalpate. It says amritvaya. For deathlessness. The literal definition of amrit is without death. Prabhupada translates it as liberation, because that's how that takes place. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. And here the word is samadukha sukham dhiram. Dhiram is a patient person, a tolerant person, a sober person. And it says samadukha sukham. And there's something interesting. The way Prabhupada translates that sama is really brilliant, because it literally, and we'll talk about this, it kind of means more, it's like it's equal or it's the same.
Yes.
So they take pleasant things and unpleasant things as if they're the same. But Prabhupada says he says here they're not disturbed. We'll talk about that a little bit more. That's interesting. So one way to approach developing tolerance, we say we have to be tolerant then, so we don't come under the control of the attachment and the aversion. The senses don't either pull us away from our duty and devotion, or the senses don't resist the devotion because it's unpleasant. And we mentioned this also in also a different way in the Nectar of Instruction classes, because we said that there's two versions of control, two definitions. Control means you can operate something, and that's what we do. We engage our senses in Krishna's service. We operate them, control them in that way, like you control an automobile or a piece of machinery. Otherwise, control can mean you stop something, you prevent it. You control weeds, you control the spread of an epidemic. It means you're pushing them, you're trying to push them down, try to stop them, this kind of thing. And so there's also a similar thing that people do, kind of the ascetic approach, or the tapasvi approach. And I found this is I just took it's a quote from the verses, but it's from the chapter summary of Srimad Bhagavatam 11:18. And it talks about what the vanaprasthas do in the varnashram system. At a certain point of life, one usually is supposed to then practice austerities. From first year, the brahmachari life, practice celibacy and this kind of stuff, and then so you're able to control your senses to some degree when you're in the married life, where there's enjoyment is there, and then at the end you're supposed to learn to control the senses again. And they do it, by really like aversion therapy. And so here it says, during the hot season, this is what the vanaprasthas should do, he should stand beneath the fearsome heat of the sun, with fires blazing on four sides. During the rainy season, he should stand in the midst of the downpour of rain, and during the cold winter, he should submerge himself in water up to his neck. And so we see that also in the Western monastic tradition and stuff. People they used to wear the hair shirt, something that would irritate their skin. They have people who are called the flagellants, who would whip themselves. And so sometimes people subject themselves to pain voluntarily, trying to get used to it. And that's the way that they learn tolerance. They give up everything enjoyable, so and they try actually to embrace pain and unpleasantness, and that way gradually not be able to be controlled by those things. And so that's one approach. Okay, and so and sometimes when we see it's supposed to be equal and happy in this, we have to have tolerance, and we have to be equal and happiness and distress. We may think it's something like that we have to go through. Okay, that's not the bhakti way. Okay? And for some reasons that we'll discuss a little bit here. I'm just going to check the time. Okay, we're pretty good. So here, Prabhupada kind of hints at that by his translation. Well, he translates sama literally same or equal, as in the word for word he says unaltered, or in the smooth translation not disturbed. So he's tying it to the ability of to one's actions. That even if there's distress, or even if there's a happiness that's a distraction, that the person is able to do their service and their devotion without interference from them. It's not that that pain becomes pleasant, or that you don't notice the difference at all, but it's that it no longer interferes with you. Now, when there's opportunity for pleasure, it may take us away from our devotional activity, and if there's unpleasantness associated with us, it may prevent us from doing that devotional activity. And so we're fighting against that. So he said when one is more mature, then one simply does the duty without any difficulty. And we'll discuss a little bit how that works. But here there's a quote from the purport where Prabhupada says, this is 415 in the purport, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the age of 24, and his dependents, young wife as well as old mother, had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause he took sannyas and was steady in the discharge of his higher duties. This is Prabhupada. I put that in bold. It wasn't that way in the text, but and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage. So it's more a function of our being able to do what we want to do, rather than some superpower. The devotees do not want to torture their senses into submission like ascetics, because such an approach makes one hard and unfeeling. Rupa Goswami talks about that. That renunciation hardens the heart. You see, because what happens if you're doing things like that, you're relying upon kind of your own strength, your own power to tolerate. Right? It's you, and you're overcoming these things by your own strength, your own power, your own purpose. So that feeds the ego.
Yeah.
Right? And also it's not satisfying in any way. It's become an end in itself. And so, so people who perform a lot of tapasya, they also have a lot of anger, because they have the pent-up desire to enjoy. And it's hard for them. It really is suffering, and so it's very, very difficult for them. And they will because they're trying to deny any feelings themselves. That's but you have to be strong to do these things, So therefore, you can't be soft-hearted. You have to be hard-hearted with yourself. And if you do it to yourself, you'll do it to others. Right? You think that not pain doesn't matter. Happiness is forbidden. And so you don't have any sympathy for anybody else. You don't have sympathy for yourself. You don't have sympathy for anybody else. And so this is not very, very good for devotees who, we already heard, are naturally soft-hearted and compassionate. And our path is the way of devotion and love. Right? So we're not here trying to cut off our compassionate feelings, our good feelings here. We're not trying to become powerful and being able to resist and overcome these things. That's not our path. So what our path is the devotees leverage the fact that they are trying to please Krishna. It's easier to do even something unpleasant, or to resist doing something else, if we're doing something for someone we love. In bhakti, we do these things for a reason, not just to become free from the control of attachment and aversion, but for the purpose of pleasing Krishna. These things are for another purpose. Okay, otherwise, the people are saying, I want to become free from attachment and aversion just so I can be liberated. It's a completely selfish motivation. And so the austerity becomes kind of an end in itself. I can become more powerful and stronger, and I'll overcome this illusion that's keeping me from attaining my rightful position. Mm-hmm. But here, even in regular non-devotional life, we find that if there's somebody we care about, we will voluntarily do things that are troublesome if they need help. We say people are fair weather friends when they don't do that. There's a fair weather friend. People have heard that terminology when you're supposedly a friend with somebody else, and when they're in trouble and need you to do something for them, you suddenly aren't their friend anymore.
Some kind of friend.
Yeah, so it's a so-called friend. A fair weather only when things are easy. So real friendship or real love, means that you will voluntarily, do something for that person that might not be convenient for you, that might be difficult for you. This is something parents, have to deal with all the time. They raise children, and so they may make sacrifices. You hear about the person working more than one job, trying to see that their child has a better life, and people will even sacrifice their lives for their loved ones. So it's that when there's a motivation like that, then one finds doing unpleasant things or avoiding pleasant things to be much more palatable and easier to do. Because one has that other motivation that's pulling them. I have love for this other person. I have care and concern for this other person. Therefore, it doesn't feel as painful. Therefore, I don't feel like I'm missing out on something else. Okay? All right. So we even have that experience in non-spiritual life, that when we have love for someone or care for somebody, that we will do what we otherwise wouldn't do. It happens that way. So that's what we try to leverage in our devotional service. I'm saying here, in bhakti, tolerance is more of a byproduct than a prerequisite. Let me get back here. Than a prerequisite. Okay. I didn't change that properly. Here, in bhakti, the tolerance is more of a byproduct than a prerequisite. The more we genuinely wish to please Krishna, the more we will find ourselves able to resist the distraction of pleasant sensations and overlook the obstacle of the unpleasant ones. So sometimes we talk about how simply by performing our bhakti, all the other things we need to attain come automatically. What it means is that we may still, at times, we consider that we're going to do a service for Krishna. We may be attracted to do something else instead, or we may find that's not the most pleasant thing to do. But instead of trying to train our senses by exposing ourselves to pain and this kind of thing, Prabhupada, there was a famous case where one of the brahmacharis was wearing no socks and no shoe and no jacket in the cold weather, and Prabhupada was saying that this isn't. He should wear something, because we're not trying to build austerity that way. But in the course of our service, right, we're going to be called upon to do things that aren't really pleasant right now. If we take a vow to chant Hare Krishna, we may be busy that day. We may want to do something else somehow. But we've taken a vow and we do it. Or we may promise to do a certain service. And so therefore, even if it may be unpleasant, we may do it. And so it doesn't mean that we only do it if it doesn't feel uncomfortable at all. But it means we reflect upon it, just like we do when we do something for people we love. And we reflect sometimes. We may balk at it. Wow, this is going to be difficult. But then we think about how much we love this person, how much how much we value Krishna. and how much gratitude we have for him, how much Krishna has done for us, how wonderful it is that he is even connected with us. And so in that way, then we can push through those things. And the more that our love for, and appreciation for Krishna increases, the more that increases. It's a natural process of our bhakti, not a separate thing. So sometimes we have that misunderstanding that in order to serve Krishna, I have to build up this tolerance. But we do it through the service and in connection with it. So sometimes we may have to, we may do something that forces us to kind of tough it out. But if we do that with the understanding it's because I want to serve Krishna, that I'm doing it for a different purpose than to just try to become tough, then it becomes genuine. If we try artificially and separately to cultivate our strength and our power, we're going to simply develop our ego, we're going to harden our heart, and we're not going to develop real sustainable. Krishna's going to talk about this in chapter 3, what happens with artificial austerities.
So even the toughness in the service of Krishna, it is just a external toughness, like temporary
Well,
that service, but it doesn't make your heart hard.
Well, like you see, like sometimes like you see these extreme cases where a mother lifts a car off her child who's performs feats of superhuman strength that nobody can figure out how they do it, or that they or you see even like in the animal kingdom, a mother will fight for her cubs or her babies and just fiercely, and again that's coming from their desire to protect. Right? And so in the same way, and of course, even though they wouldn't do that otherwise, they'll attack something stronger than them, try to put themselves in danger. That's because, though, it's connected to their maternal instinct, their connection with their young. And the same thing, human beings will go through things that they otherwise couldn't do because of that affection. And so sometimes they have to, sometimes it's not easy. But they're understanding why they're doing it. They otherwise wouldn't do it. So in the same way, there may be times when we push our limits, right? But that's because we want to serve. That's because we're appreciating Krishna, and it's for the purpose of Krishna's pleasure, not for our own trying to become more powerful. Yeah, so when that happens, then of course we get reciprocation from Krishna. See, we get the higher taste comes into play, and that helps to strengthen that. But if we simply rely on our own strength, then our devotion actually can be checked. We have lack of compassion for others. Look, this other person isn't very renounced. Look at them. See, this other devotee is not very renounced like I am. You start finding fault with others. The austerity becomes kind of an end in itself. And if it's not connected with Krishna, you don't get the same reciprocation from Krishna.
Saw this in impersonalists, more pride things.
Yeah, we start to feel we take credit for that ability to be renounced. If we do that, see, I can do this despite everything. It has to be kept connected with whatever desire, whatever level of desire. It doesn't have to be, of course, in our most of our stages of devotional service, we don't have we're not love of Godhead. When people have Krishna prema, Bhakti Vinod has this, Thakur has this wonderful, one of his writings. He says that if your happiness is to cause me pain, then my pain is my happiness. That Krishna will be pleased by his suffering.
Okay.
He says then my suffering will be happiness for me. That's Krishna prema. Okay, that's the love is so high at that point that any discomfort or any inconvenience is it almost makes them feel that now they really have a chance to show their love. It makes some sense. For us, we don't have so much love, but at least we need to have some understanding about who Krishna is, how much we owe him, how kind and merciful he is. He has come here. He has sent his devotees after us. We've been here in this world we don't know how long. And he has come specifically for us, each and every one of us. And he and his devotees have taken efforts to save us. And for no good reason, he wants to have a connection with us. We're not anything special.
Yes.
But he thinks we are. And so if we reflect upon that, we reflect upon the nature of Krishna, we should have some gratitude at least, and at least want to do something in return. And if we have that, then we can gradually build up. There's a process that's indicated between verse 14 and 15. First, we turn to tolerate. We may want to do something for Krishna, and it may not be easy. But through that reflection on our what we owe Krishna and who he is and what it's worth, we will be able to push through that.
Then he certainly.
And then our devotion can begin to grow. We can, and so and that leads to the point of this is right now we're in that situation where the senses are pulling us and pushing us away from our service, pushing us to not do the service, or pushing us to do something else, pulling us to do something else, and that's why our service is unsteady. It says that sometimes we're more enthusiastic than others, and what happens when we're enthusiastic? We serve more, and it doesn't feel like anything, right? And so this process of going from verse 14 to 15 to steadiness, where you can do it, is very important to us. But we have to do it in the right way. Sometimes we make that mistake. We have a tendency to think that we can do like the ascetics do and overpower the senses. We become super tolerant people. What we need to do is become more devotional people. We do that by becoming super devotional people, not super tolerant people. We have to have super appreciation for Krishna, a super feeling of debt and gratitude, and whatever beginnings of love we have for Krishna, an appreciation for him. Those things should be our motivating factor. And the response we get from Krishna is the reinforcing factor. So we may have to preach to ourselves on our occasions. It's not that it just happens completely automatically, but it should be, the effort we make should be in connection with our desire to serve and our appreciation for Krishna. That's the difference. If we simply do what feels good all the time, or what doesn't, avoid what we don't feel good, and we'll stay at the same level of devotion.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have to meditate a little bit and think about what we owe for Krishna, and we have to then try to allow that to help us to become more steady, to be less attracted and to be less averse, But that's not a separate endeavor in that case. If we do it thinking, it says sometimes we may be called upon to do something for someone we care about. It may be really hard, and we think, oh my God, how am I going to do that? But no, this person is so dear to me, I'm going to do it somehow.
Right. They did so much for me.
They did so much for me, therefore, let me do it somehow. And we do that with Krishna. You see, so we do have to push forward. And it may not just be, completely happen on its own. But if it's connected with Krishna's service, if it's connected with the understanding, I'm doing this because I appreciate Krishna, I want to serve him, then we have that opportunity to grow in that regard. And you see, otherwise we're caught in a very strange circumstance right now, where we want to serve, we genuinely do, we're sincere, but so many times we don't do it as much or as well as we want to. So we have this like internal division. We don't do what we want to do. That's called anishtita sadhana bhakti. And the difference between that and steady bhakti is described in this verse 14 and 15. And we see that with Arjuna. Even his understanding gets blown away because it's so painful for him to do what he's supposed to do.
So, if we do with that kind of consciousness, like tolerate the situations and continue devotion service, then we will be certainly eligible for liberation. That's what it means, right? So,
yeah, it means at that point you are, you're moving towards Jivan Mukta.
okay.
And it's called being liberated within the body. And then we're going to hear about the details of that. First of all, we're going to hear in the next section we'll hear, and we'll pass over that. We're going to hear more about who that embodied situation is, who's eternal, how we're eternal, who we are, what it's all about with that, to reinforce some of the things we hear. And then we're going to hear about how also we cultivate a practice that allows us to realize the soul, realize ourselves as spirit, to become disconnected from this attachment and aversion to things. And it'll be the thing that we'll be talking about. Nishkama karma yoga will be a lot of what happens in this chapter later on, and that will mean that and he's going to tell Arjuna, and Arjuna is very suited to this. We'll see. And but we'll see that it's an essential component of bhakti, because when we serve, we're not looking out for some selfish interest. We're looking for Krishna's interest. So nishkama karma yoga means we do our duty without thinking of the rewards that usually come from doing dharma. We just do it because it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And so bhakti even extends that further. But it's an essential component. We may try to serve, but if we're thinking about certain, especially material rewards that we can get out of that inhibits the progress there. And so we'll discuss about how different other practices and understandings we can do that will help us in this process. But it's interesting how so much is covered in these few verses. No, Arjuna, you're an eternal. Actually, he implies you're a soul, because there's something that's going through these bodies. You're an eternal being, right? Death is not such a consequential thing as you're thinking. You're even doing it in this life in so many ways, and you're not disturbed by that. Actually, it says that there's kind of an internal dialogue where Arjuna says, but actually it's not very pleasant to grow old. In other words, in this body, the change, when you're young, the change of bodies is kind of cool, You grow up, everybody's excited. You celebrate your birthdays, and you get more capabilities. You're stronger. It's kind of more intelligent. All these things happen. And then later on, as we start to decline, it's not quite as pleasant. So then, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says that that's a good argument also against his attachment for Bhishma and Drona. He says even if they die, they'll get new bodies now. They're in that old age stage, So they're already feeling discomfort from death, because their bodies, the kind of death that happens within the lifetime, because they're growing older. So they'll be freed from that. All right. Well, thank all of you for taking the time. Those who are here, and of course, we're recording here, so those who aren't here can listen any other time at their convenience. But I thank all of you who took the time to come to listen now, both on the conference call and here in person. And we'll be next week is scheduled to be holy. It's a holy celebration, which will take all of our resources here. There won't be any parking, and I'll be engaged in various services. So unless Holi is rained out, we have a rain date for the next week. If Holi goes on as scheduled, we won't have the class next Saturday, and I'll send an email out also to that effect. If somehow it's rained out this week and it goes to the next one, then it'll be on, and then next week will be canceled. But we're going to have to. We won't be able to do this and Holi at the same time, because all hands are needed to make that festival happen. So anyway, again, thank you very much, Hare Krishna, and we'll see you soon.